Runaway Convention. One of the main concerns that I hear when I talk about this sounds great. I would love to see all these things happen, but is it safe? And one of the main terms that I hear thrown out there when people are concerned about the safety of the convention is, could it run away? A runaway convention, right? What if we have a convention and things go horribly bad? So let's take a look at that. That comes down to two issues. One, would the delegates, or the commissioners as they're called, at the convention have the authority to do something outside of what the convention was called for? And two, do we have any precedent of that happening before? So let's talk about authority. The Constitution gives authority to the state legislatures to call for the convention. It says, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments. This doesn't address the authority given to commissioners at all. Why not? Well, the answer to that is quite simple. That's authority given to the state legislatures to decide. The state legislatures, when they send commissioners, give them a commission. That's the reason why they are called commissioners. And they have to function within the bounds of that commission. We've had a lot of different conventions, not an Article 5 convention, but in our country's history, there has been a lot of conventions where states have gotten together, sometimes a lot of them, sometimes a few of them. We even have them going on currently where states will get together, we call them compacts, to discuss things. This is not a novel concept. This is something that was in practice at the time when the founders wrote the Constitution, so they knew what this meant, right? And state legislatures in particular, have the authority to give their commissioners certain authorities as to how they can function. And with sorry, with the convention where they actually wrote up the document for our Constitution, certain commissioners had limitations on them. And those limitations actually led to certain changes being made to our Constitution to allow for the commissioners to vote for the document that we have today. That's part of the reason why we have both a House and a Senate, because certain commissioners had certain limitations on what they could vote for. States had to be given certain equalities. That's certain limitations that were given to the commissioners. Anyhow, I digress. The point here is that the Constitution gives authority to the state legislatures, right? So who gives authority to the commissioners? Well, the state legislatures do. Part of that authority is when they call for the convention. They're specifically stating the topic of the convention. So the states are themselves limiting the topic of the convention by the resolution that they pass. Additionally, then, of course, they limit the authority of the commissioners when they give them a commissioner. So what happens if you say, well, that's all great, but what if people don't follow the rules, right? Because people sometimes don't follow the rules. So let's just say that commissioners look at their commission and say, to heck with it. I'm going to do what I want. Well, that's really, really nice. One, it will never pass in a court of law. Two, the other state commissioners that are present are not going to put up with a commissioner from, say, Michigan going off the rails and trying to do something that they're not allowed to do, right? They will just call them out of order. So one, they'll call them out of order. Two, if it actually, they somehow by some miracle got it through, it would probably end up in court. But three, remember the process. Anything that gets out of a convention has to be approved by the state legislatures. They could go, let's say they went totally crazy and they proposed that everyone has to wear purple on Wednesday, right? You're not going to get 38 state legislatures to approve that. There just is no way. Only the most agreed upon amendments are ever going to get ratified by 38 states. And let me tell you, it is way easier for state legislatures to vote no on something than to vote yes. Chances of anything even getting to a state legislature like that are, I do not expect it to ever happen. It just does not make sense. But if it ever did, there's no way it's going to get passed. All right, so let's talk about precedent because that's the other issue. Has this ever happened before? Has a state commissioner at a convention ever gone outside of the bounds of what they were given authority to do? Because if you're going to say, well, this is going to happen, normally it's because you say it's happened before, right? And in particular, when people say this has happened before, they are normally referring to our constitutional convention, the Philadelphia Convention, where our Constitution was actually written up. And that's actually a really scary concept because if our Constitution itself was illegally written up, we're defending a fraud. When we say, we love our Constitution and we want to keep it exactly the way it is, we're actually defending a fraud. That would be horrible. Fortunately, that's not the case. All right. Our Constitution was not illegally drawn up. And I will break it down for you real quick. Frequently, when people say that it was, they are mixing up two conventions that happened, the Annapolis Convention and the Philadelphia Convention. The Annapolis Convention took place in September of 1786. The reason for the Annapolis Convention is that when our country was initially founded, we did not have a constitution. We had what were called the Articles of Confederation. Problem is the Articles of Confederation had a lot of issues. They pretty much said nobody has to listen to anybody else, and you can't make any changes unless everyone unanimously agrees. There's no compromise in there at all. And if you have any familiarity with politics, you can see what the problems would be. It was completely non-functioning. It was a mess. So in 1786, a few states sent delegates to a convention, commissioners, I should say, to see if there was any way that you could fix the Articles of Confederation. Those commissioners had their convention, and their conclusion was no. Articles of Confederation are trash, my paraphrase. You can't fix this mess, basically. We recommend that you call for another convention to write up a new document. They sent that recommendation back to their states, and then all the states together called for a convention to write a new document. That convention was the Philadelphia Convention. At the Philadelphia Convention, commissioners or delegates recommended a new process for ratifying changes. Because remember, under Articles of Confederation, all 13 states would have had to agree to changes. That wasn't going to work. People weren't agreeing with each other. Remember, we had discontent going on. So they said, let's propose two things. The commissioners did. One, we propose that you adapt new rules. We want all the states to agree that you can make changes with the approval of 9 states instead of 13. The second thing we recommend that you do is ratify this new document, the Constitution. All right, so that's what came out of the Philadelphia Convention. What followed was a two-step process. First, all 13 states approved the rule change. They all agreed to having changes to the document being approved by 9 and not 13 states. And we actually had 11 of the 13 states approve the U.S. Constitution. The remaining 2 did eventually approve it and ratify it. It took them a few years, so they didn't participate in some of the things in our history that happened in those years. Like, I want to say it was some of the inaugurations for Washington as president, that kind of thing. All right, but that was the process. It was followed. There were legal rule changes, and every commissioner did only what was within their authority. The commissioners that went to the Philadelphia Convention did not ratify the Constitution. They sent it back to the state legislatures who had the authority to do so. All right. Whew.